What is going on, guys? It is Taylor the Fiend back again, and on today's episode we have a video here from the Young Turks titled "Right Wingers Are Fighting to End No-Fault Divorce." So let's jump in. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and your comments.
No-fault divorce is very, very bad.
But I think the reform to no-fault divorce is far simpler. It should be reformed by simply ceasing to exist. Marriage is much more than a contract. It's a covenant.
There are a lot of problems with the current legal structure of marriage. I agree with that critique of the current legal structure of marriage. No-fault divorce is one of the worst things that ever happened to Western civilization.
I think she's entitled to nothing during these proceedings, and I think the problem is no-fault divorce.
I still believe that children need a mom and a dad and that divorce is horrible. But in today's legal system, my beliefs don't matter.
We gotta get rid of no-fault divorce.
Well, Tim Pool, you might be getting your wish, because there are Republican lawmakers who are literally working on that type of policy as we speak. So conservative lawmakers in multiple states and on a national level are considering attempts to eliminate or restrict divorces in cases where fault cannot be proven. Right now, laws exist on or in all 50 states that allows people to end a marriage without having to prove that someone in that marriage did something wrong, like cheating or domestic abuse. The socially conservative, though, and often religious members of society have a different idea, right? So right-wing opponents of such laws are arguing that this deprives men of due process and it hurts families. In reality, oftentimes, couples that want a divorce don't want to accuse each other of terrible things. They just want to part ways and be done with it.
You gotta love how this woman right here is defending no-fault divorce. So let's be clear about this. Let's cut the nonsense. Women are the ones who are initiating divorces, right? She's wording it, oh, people just want to separate and we just need to allow people to separate because that's the best thing to do. But in reality, what is happening is that women are leaving their husbands simply because they feel like it, right? Not because anything bad was done. This is why we have so many of these videos of women coming out and saying, oh, I divorced my husband. He was just an awful man. And then you ask them how he was awful and they have no answer. Oh, I did all of the emotional labor in the relationship, whatever the hell that means. What's happening is you have these women who are divorcing their husbands because they feel like it. Hell, oftentimes they're the ones in the wrong, being absolutely psychotic, cheating, whatever the case may be. And then they walk away because they feel like it and take a large portion of the man's money and his kids. You wonder why men don't want to marry you. But of course, this woman right here is defending no-fault divorce, typical.
And I don't really see how it's beneficial for society to force two individuals who no longer want to be in a marriage to continue being in a marriage, living under the same roof, and being miserable with one another.
Here's a thought, madam. Don't marry a man if you're not interested in long-term commitment. It's not that hard. Vows exist for a reason. Till death do us part, in sickness and in health. And yet so many of these women they think that these are just fluffy words that sound pretty so that they can get a nice ring on their finger. It's disgusting.
But nonetheless, many of you have already heard claims from conservatives like Tim Pool who think that it's a bad idea to allow people to have these no-fault divorces. And you're about to hear more. Let's watch.
What we're talking about in the American divorce regime is called no-fault divorce. And no-fault divorce is, one, a contradiction in terms. You can't get it. You can't break a contract if there's no fault of anyone. And two, it's horrific for children and it's horrific for the spouses.
Marriage is much more than a contract. It's a covenant. To truly go your own way, alone and isolated, is to give up on your duty, your legacy, your ancestors, your bloodline, your civilization, your happiness.
Marriage is a commitment. That commitment is lifelong. There should actually have to be a really, really, really good reason why you are divorcing, and that's particularly true if you have children, because, of course, marriage is designed as the fundamental building block of institutional society. It is the place where children are reared. It is the place where you produce children in the first place, and children require stability.
The traditional response to how you fix marriage is divorce is not allowed. There's rare circumstances where like a guy is threatening to murder and beating his wife and his kids, and infidelity is one of these things.
This is what women will always claim is happening, right? Is, oh, he's abusive, or I married a bad man and I didn't know. But then when you ask them for proof, all of a sudden, there's no proof whatsoever. You talk to the man and he's the most level-headed individual on the face of the planet, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, well, Is the woman just lying? Because every single one of these women who goes through their divorce and takes their husband for money, they always think that they're the one special case where, no, my husband was actually an awful man and I'm the victim. It's just complete nonsense, right? It's a lot of lying. It's a lot of wanting to return to the streets, right? And just leaving because she feels like it, or leaving because she feels like she deserves better, or trying to take the kids, trying to take his money, etc.
Guy is threatening to murder and beating his wife and his kids. And infidelity is one of these things.
No-fault divorce is an absolute tragedy. It is the catalyst for every other degenerate marriage and relationship problem that we have in society.
Thanks for watching. Our audience has helped build TYT into the media giant it is today. Together, we can accomplish anything. Support our work and join us at tyt.com team. She sounds like a good time. Listen, great, go ahead and pass laws restricting divorce, and let's see how much the marriage rate drops from what it already is. It's already dropped considerably, but you're going to make it harder for people to divorce. You're going to have more people living under the same roof, having children out of wedlock, which is what conservatives don't want. Idea that a couple needs to prove that there's a good reason for them to divorce in order to be able to part ways is ridiculous to me.
This woman is so triggered, man. See, the reason why this is ridiculous to women is because they just want to be able to leave whenever it is that they feel like. Right? It's time to leave. There's a better option down the road. I might go to him instead. I don't really see this. I'm not really, my feelings aren't invested in this marriage anymore. I don't feel like I'm attracted to my husband anymore. So you know what? It's time to leave. And ordinarily, guys, I would agree with this woman. Leave the relationship if you want. Leave the situation if you want. But guess what? We're not talking about typical relationships here. We are talking about marriage. One does not simply leave marriage because you feel like it, right? Of course, nowadays you can do that, obviously. But these women are thinking, they're trying to pitch it to you as though it's no big deal. You should just be able to leave relationships simply because you feel like it. It's cruel to the couples to try and keep them together. Here's a thought, madam. Maybe don't get married to someone that you don't see yourself spending the rest of your life with. Because the reason why no-fault divorce supposedly was institutionalized in the first place was because all of these women were trapped in these toxic relationships. And as soon as they brought out no-fault divorce, all of the women went out there, divorce rates like through the roof. And I guarantee you, not all of those men were awful. Right? All of this is just, honestly, just a wealth transfer from men to women, right? Isn't the world's richest woman, or lots of the world's richest women, aren't they all rich from divorce? Right? That should tell you something.
And this is coming from individuals who purport to want to protect freedom in America. But they're getting involved in literally the most intimate personal decisions that Americans can make about their personal lives.
Oh, don't give me that, man. The government is involved. Don't get me started on this crapper. Conservatives don't want the government involved in their personal lives. At the end of the day, guys, that's what this is really about. It's because what's happening is women are divorcing their husbands, and then they're just taking children. They're separating the family because they feel like it, and they're taking his money. Right? Conservatives and people with common sense in general are just sick of the government having their hands in absolutely everything, and quite frankly, being robbed.
It is insane. In the case of Steven Crowder, by the way, he was bitter after it was exposed that he's pretty abusive to his wife.
I don't know about you guys, but I saw those clips, and that just looked like a cringe, bad argument that anyone would have at some point during their marriage. That leaked footage that I saw of Crowder and his wife, if that's the worst you have to show me about someone's year upon year long marriage, you're going to have to do better. The woman, didn't they go to court? Steven Crowder and his wife, didn't they literally go to court? The judge told the woman not to delete any of the other footage that was surveillanced in the house, and she went ahead and deleted it all. That should tell you something, guys. Right? All of that crap looked completely planned to me. Now, my sympathy towards Steven Crowder is a little bit lessened, considering he, at least as far as I understand it, was advocating for men to go out here and get married despite these dangers, but that's another discussion entirely. As far as I saw it, his wife was manipulative as hell, and completely, at the end of this marriage, she was really trying to get him there. And if that's the worst she can do with all of this manipulation and nonsense, she's going to have to do a little bit better.
And yeah, she wanted a divorce. Who wouldn't want a divorce? And by the way, I just want to make clear, in that case, I wouldn't say that it's a no-fault divorce. Seems like there's some evidence indicating that that relationship was not a good one.
Wife was a psycho.
Potentially a very abusive one, and I hope that he's able to part ways with him and not have to deal with him ever again. Unfortunately, they have children together, but it is what it is. Here's Senator J.D. Vance talking about increasing divorce rates back in 2021.
And this is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is this idea that, like, well, these marriages were fundamentally, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy. And so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses, to change their underwear, that's going to make people happier in the long term. And maybe it worked out for the moms and dads, though I'm skeptical, but it really didn't work out for the kids of those marriages. And I think that's what all of us should be honest about, is we've run this experiment in real time, and what we have is a lot of very, very real family dysfunction that's making our kids unhappy.
There are a lot of myths about the divorce rate in America, and it's enraging because it just persists and no one ever really looks into it. So let's talk about what divorce in America really looks like. There was a period of time where divorces experienced a spike. So the divorce rate in the United States increased significantly from 1960, when it was 9.2 per 1,000 married women, to 22.6 in 1980. But by 2022, the rate had fallen to 14.5.
I'm not sure how accurate these statistics are. Perhaps I should go and take a look at them myself, but these seem incredibly low to me. And also, so TLDR on what the man was saying before was that the reason why no-fault divorce was introduced in the first place was because supposedly so many women were just in these terrible relationships and they had to leave. And guys, I understand there would be terrible relationships with bad men who did bad things to their wife, but actually have a look at how many women divorced their husbands after that. I guarantee you not all of them were as awful as they were made out to be. That's the narrative that's being pushed, media these days, I suppose you would call it, is that men are bad, men are awful, and women should give every opportunity to be able to leave a man, even if they're in a marriage, simply because they feel like it. And again, guys, no proof. Every single time I see one of these divorces occur, or every single time I see one of these TikToks, we never get any proof. We just get a bunch of emotional gobbledygook that makes no sense about the man being emotionally unavailable or not feeling seen in the relationship, whatever the hell that means.
Now, there's a reason for that. And it's because of the fact that, waited longer to get married. I think that has a lot to do with it. So you don't get married when you're super young and you don't even know who you are yet. I think that had something to do with it.
Yeah, but you have to go out there for a decade of your life and sleep with a whole bunch of random men first, right? And this one's onto something, okay? As far as I understand it, getting married later. And the reason for that is because they push it off because they think that they have all of the time in the world.
But the reason why there was that spike in divorces is because many of those marriages were in fact violent. There was domestic abuse within those marriages. And suddenly you have a situation in which women felt empowered to leave an abusive marriage.
I love how confidently she says this, but these relationships dissipating, these marriages dissipating, the women weren't required to give any proof. You can't just say, well, there was a huge spike in divorces because all of the men were bad people with no proof whatsoever. That's what this woman just said. All of these divorces occurred because these men, horrible things to their wife. Okay, claim to make, a lot of eyeballs on your little news podcast here. Where's the proof?
So before 1969, when California Republican Governor Ronald Reagan approved the country's first no-fault divorce law, yeah, Ronald Reagan, he did that, women were often forced to stay in abusive marriages. Between 1976 and 1985, states that passed the laws saw their domestic violence rates against men and women fall by about 30%. The number of women murdered by an intimate partner declined by 10%, and female suicide rates also declined by 8 to 16%. And this impacted children as well, not in a negative way, in a positive way, because they're no longer stuck in a household where they have parents engaging in domestic violence, obviously. Kimberly Well, who's a professor at the University.
I love how we don't talk about the flip side of this. which is that the families are completely disbanded in the process of doing this, right? I have no doubt that there were bad men, right, in those relationships. There was, bad eggs, so to speak. But what you've just allowed is the floodgates to be completely opened here, right? Being able to divorce your partner simply because you feel like it. If you look at modern day marriage statistics, it is overwhelmingly the women who are deciding to leave these marriages with no evidence whatsoever. Okay, times they are completely disbanding their families. I have a very hard time believing that the kids are better off when you have all of these women who are getting into marriages and simply walking away whenever they want to. I have a very, very hard time believing that kids perform better in separated households. Like, let's think about that for a second, okay? This one is trying to push the idea that these marriages dissipating is somehow completely fine for children, right? Because the parents are no longer fighting. So, separate the two. Let's split custody. Hell, let's probably give more custody to the women. Because statistically speaking, guys, whenever custody is even fought for in the courtroom, women typically get it. Just completely fine for children, apparently, because the parents are no longer arguing and no longer doing awful things to one another. Again, the supposition is that every time men are awful.
As well, not in a negative way, in a positive way, because they're no longer stuck in a household where they have parents engaging in domestic violence, obviously. Kimberly Well, who's a professor at the University of Baltimore School of Law, says that without such laws, meaning the ability to have a no-fault divorce, it's hard to prove anything in court relating to a family because you don't have any witnesses. It's very difficult to get evidence to show abuse of children. How do you do it? Do you put your kids on the stand?
Here's the thing, right? A lot of these women are saying that their husbands are doing awful things to them. I don't care if it's difficult to get proof, right? If you have no proof, that's it, right? Oh, it's so hard for me to get proof that my husband is an awful person. I'm sorry, but unless you have proof, I'm not going to believe you, right? Gone are the days of Me Too, where men are simply required to believe all women simply because they say things. Right? Oh, but the evidence is difficult to get, and you not just get this sort of evidence, and I don't want to put my kids up on the stand. Okay, now it's shifted from the women are having bad things being done to them to the children are having bad things done to them, and I can't get any evidence. I'm sorry, guys, but if you want to divorce your husband simply because you feel like it, you better well have some proof, right? Like, at the very least, you shouldn't be able to walk away with his kids and his things, right? If you're going to claim such things.
Of whom stayed home and didn't make money on their own. If they could not prove that their husband had been abusive or persuade him to grant a divorce, they would not be able to take any assets from that marriage or remarry. And that's according to a study that was published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics.
Sounds good to me. So if you can't prove that your husband was an awful man, right, then, and you can't persuade him to get a divorce, then you shouldn't be able to get a divorce and take his crap. Sounds fine to me, right? And this woman's complaining about this.
But some people in the alleged Party for Personal Freedom, which is hilarious to me considering what they're trying to do here, basically want to go back to the Dark Ages. And they want to go back to an era where no-fault divorces were not allowed, where they were banned. Republican lawmakers have discussed increasing no-fault marriage laws or eliminating them entirely in Louisiana, in Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas. In January, for instance, the Oklahoma State Senator Nevers, it's a fun name, I guess, but he's a far-right Christian pastor who describes himself as an abortion abolitionist, introduced a bill that would eliminate no-fault divorces in his state.
I love this little chuckle that these people do. They're like, oh, he's a Christian, and she slightly laughs about it, right? These people, they don't like religion, right? And it's just always funny to me how these the page media outlets always just crap all over Christianity. Okay, they're supposed to be the most tolerant, right, and the most inclusive of everybody, and everybody gets a fair go, and we're all about equality. But the moment you bring up Christianity, they don't like it, man. They really do not. Anything that, anything to do with women's ability to simply do whatever the hell they want, they don't like it. And that's why this woman immediately opposes this, right? Because she, like many other modern women, want to be able to get into a marriage and simply leave it whenever it is that they feel like it, as long as it's beneficial. Okay, and if you have any disagreements with that, you know, you're a traditional Christian, you would probably disagree with that, then they're not going to like you very much. But guys, we are going to be leaving today's episode there. As always, good to see. I'm really familiar with this news podcast thing going on here. But this woman seems like a bit of a clown, right? She's always very triggered by things that make sense. So maybe we'll keep covering this. As always, guys, make sure you take care of yourselves, and I'll be seeing you all in the next one. Peace.